Hello once again, and Tony here with a review of Meyerbeer's L'Africaine, working title Vasco da Gama, which had its premiere last night at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. The conductor was Enrique Mazzolla. The production was handled by Vera and Sonia Nemirova. The set design was handled by Jens Kilian. The costumes were done by Marie-Thérèse Jossen. The choreographers were Barty Ramtoni and Zilke Zense. The videography was handled by Markus Richard. The lights were handled by Ulrich Niepel. The chorus master was William Spalding, and the dramaturgy was done by Jörg Königsdorf. Now, L'Africaine is, Giacomo Meyerbeer's last opera, which premiered posthumously as he passed away in 1864. Now, Giacomo Meyerbeer is no stranger when it comes to French grand operas, but even before that time, he composed a couple of German operas and a couple of Italian operas, and some of those French operas were also performed in Italian in a lot of Italian opera houses, and in fact, some of the arias were sung in Italian, most notably in L'Africaine. Instead of the usual O Paradis sung in French, this was sung in Italian as O Paradiso by a lot of well-known Italian tenors like Beniamino Gigli, Luciano Pavarotti, Mario Lanza, Mario del Monaco, and many, many others. And his well-known works include Les Huguenots, Robert le Diable, L'Étoile du Nord, Dinora, and of course, L'Africaine. And, L'Africaine also has a very interesting history, as this opera has mostly been performed around Europe and has had its premiere around the 1800s and even the 20th century in the States, specifically in the Metropolitan Opera. However, this opera isn't really that well-known, with the exception of being well-known around Europe, like in France or in Germany or many, many others, or even in regional opera companies. In fact, probably some of the commercial recordings available for this opera have to be with the performance done in the 80s or 90s, or late 80s at the San Francisco Opera House, with Shirley Verrett as the Zelica, Ruth Ann Swinson as the Ines, and Placido Domingo as Vasco da Gama. Other than that, this opera hasn't really been well known, save for the tenor aria, O Paradiso, or in French Au Paradis, and the soprano aria Adieu mon doux rivage, and Zelica's Sur mes genoux, sung in Italian as In grembo a me. So, now that that's out of the way, let's get on to what I thought about the production, singers, and conducting. Now, the production of this opera, it basically starts off with seeing an array of paper boats. And then we see Inez in a sailor girl outfit alongside her confidante, Anna. I thought it looked really pretty on her, as if though to symbolize that she's still a very young girl, about, 17, 18, probably early 20s. And, in those times, it's kind of harsh for her to grow up to be a woman. And then we first see a globe in which it goes from being some wall, and then when it slowly collapses, it turns into a platform, thus making it very versatile. However, if I have one problem with the production, it definitely has to be the backdrop. Sometimes I definitely feel that the backdrop could have been a lot more elaborate and intricate, but what they've done with the production in terms of its sets is actually to their favor, even though I probably would have loved to have a lot more scenery. Because the thing about L'Africaine is that this is also one of the most difficult operas to stage as well. Hence, that's why it's probably been well, it hasn't really been performed that much. Because, well, in the first scene, you need a lot of scenery to show that, okay, this is Enos's house. And then you also need to change the scenery to show that, okay, this is the scene where the Grand Inquisitor has his meetings. And then the next scene is on a ship, on a storm, and then in some exotic island in the last few acts of the opera. So, in short, this opera is definitely a huge challenge for everyone involved in the props and the costume department to really put together. But what they've had with this production is actually kind of interesting and very much very much intricate in its own right. However, if there's also one area where I kind of found that the lighting was kind of jarring was the marriage scene, as if I don't really understand why the lighting had to change into several colors. Couldn't it have changed into just blue, as if though that it was mainly like they were mainly on sea, like at night? But even then, I guess it was just to show, okay, they can change into a lot of color and all that stuff. But even then, the production itself was actually pretty good. I could have wished for a lot more scenery, but I guess you get what you settle for. But the costumes, I really have to say, were all gorgeous. I especially love Selika's costume. She looked really gorgeous, as in everything really does well with her contour and her physique, that it really makes her look so angelic and so lovely. With Ines, I thought she looked really lovely as well. The fact that she started off the scene with a sailor girl outfit and then into something a lot more formal, and then with her wedding gown, and then even that gown that she wore on the island, I thought they all looked really lovely on her. And sure, the costumes are very intricate and very wonderful in their own ways. And not to mention Vasco da Gama's costume as well, as if though that he's to remind us that yes, he's not like the other noble men, but he's an explorer that's, well, unique in his own way and doesn't really play by the rules, hence he has that costume. Not to mention that final scene in which Zelika places Vasco da Gama's shirt on her body. I thought it was just really touching as well. Not to mention the opera ends with Vasco da Gama coming back, finally realizing that Zelika is dead, and probably asking himself, what has he done? As if though this were almost like Pinkerton coming back to like Butterfly's aid after Chocho-san has killed herself. Something like that. So what I really found in this production is that it's really well done with what props they had, and not to mention the costumes were really the selling point in this production. So let's get on with the singers. In the title role of Zelika, the African maiden in this title, we have French mezzo-soprano Sophie Koch, who I also saw last year in the live stream Metropolitan Opera production of Massenet's Werther. Now, throughout history, the role of Zelika has been coveted by a lot of spinto sopranos, dramatic sopranos, falcon sopranos, and dramatic mezzos. In short, just like Carmen, Eboli, Amneris, Sieglinde, Venus, Ortrud, Kundry, Margaret, Lady Macbeth, and many other roles of the falcon soprano repertoire, Zelika has been coveted by a lot of singers, and with pretty much good reason. Her her vocal range exceeds not only that of a typical mezzo-soprano, but she has to sing a lot of high notes as well. She has a lot of high A's, B flats, and B's. And even though she has those high notes, she does have a lot of low notes as well, which is a huge challenge for a lot of sopranos and mezzos who dare to sing her. In fact, a lot of like sopranos and mezzos who sing her have been very well known in that role, like Shirley Verrett and Grace Bumbry, and even Montserrat Caballé, and even a lot of other great singers of the past, like Emmy Kruger. They've made their name in the role of the African woman. And with Sophie Koch, I could really see that she has developed a lot as a singer. She started out in a lot of the lyrical parts, but nowadays she's heading to a lot more dramatic parts. Not just Charlotte von Werther, but also Guinevere from Le Roi Arthur, and this, Zelika, and also Venus from Tannhäuser, and even a Fricka from Das Rheingold, and even a Brangena from Tristan und Isolde. I really have to say that Sophie Koch really sang her heart out in this role. She looked very gorgeous in whatever costume that she wore, especially her Indian Queen costume. I thought it looked very lovely on her. It fit her very perfectly, and it just looked really, really gorgeous on her. Her technique is excellent, hitting all of the high notes and hitting all of those low notes without resorting to an ugly chest voice. She sings her part very well and with such aplomb and finesse that she is totally on par with a lot of the greats. And she's absolutely a great herself. She really knew how to have an excellent technique, and she really knew how to make Zelika a woman who suffers, a woman who has to go through a lot of pain and suffering in order to really make it to her ultimate destiny. And her death scene, I thought, was just so well done, hitting all of the right notes and just making me almost teary-eyed. I really thought that Miss Koch really gave such a heartfelt performance of the title heroine. And then we have the role of Inez, sung by Nino Machaidze. Now, unlike Zelika, in which you need a dramatic soprano with mezzo-soprano tendencies, albeit a soprano who has sung Carmen, Ortrud, Amneris, Sieglinde, and Margaret, and Kundry, with Inez, you need a soprano who is more lyrical, that can also hit a lot of the high notes as well. She needs a high lyric soprano voice with some spinto soprano tendencies. Any voice that has sung the likes of Elsa from Lohengrin, one of the flower maidens from Parsifal, Michaela from Carmen, Rosanne from Loadis, Eudoxie from La Juive, and many, many other roles for a lyric soprano. And a lot of sopranos have found their success in this role as well. Of course, a lot of sopranos would also flock to sing Zelika, but some sopranos have actually found some success in this role, like Mieta Sigele and Ruth Ann Swenson, because of her very high tessitura and her florid singing. You really have to make Inez a really great character in terms of florid singing and in terms of a flawless execution in her voice. And I thought Nino Machaidze really does a fantastic job in making Inez really such a multi-layered character. She starts out as a very jovial and sweet young girl who is totally head over heels in love with Vasco da Gama, only to find out that she is going to be married to a general by the name of Don Pedro by her father. She is at first very upset at this, and her heart still goes out to Vasco, but because of her duty as a daughter to a very rich man, she has no choice. But she doesn't go crazy over anything. She definitely has to deal with it, and when there is an invasion by Nelusco's men, she has to deal with the fact that, okay, she's in a new situation right now, and she has to look for Vasco, even though Vasco presumes her to be dead. So her journey from being a girl to being somehow of a woman is sort of a very fascinating journey for Inez. And with, like I said, with Nina Machadze, she really hits all the notes. She really sings all of her high notes well. They are piercing, they are gorgeous like comets, and not to mention her stage presence is just so elegant. You could really see her transitioning from girlhood to womanhood within the span of like 4 hours, and I really enjoyed everything that Machadze had to offer in this thankless role. Of course, Inez definitely has to play second fiddle to Zelika because of, I think with Zelika she has a lot of great music, like in Gremboame or Sumejano, and also her death scene. But with Inez, she mainly has her ballad Adieu, mon doux rivage, and her septet with Zelika and all the other characters, and even her duet with Zelika. I really enjoyed the duet between Sophie Koch and Nina Machadze. I thought their voices blended very well, and I thought these two had really great chemistry. So I really found Nina Machadze to be a very great singer and a very great actress in her own right, which is no surprise because I've also seen some clips of her on YouTube, specifically as Gilda from Rigoletto and the title role of Lucia di Lammermoor, a very fine singer that I really hope to hear a lot more of. And then we get to Inez's confidant, Anna, sung by a young American mezzo by the name of Irene Roberts. Now, Anna has been performed by a lot of light lyric sopranos and even some lyric mezzos as well, because even though Anna mostly appears in like the first and second act, well, she still has a very substantial role. And with Irene Roberts as Anna, I really enjoyed that silky texture to her voice in such a very thankless role. She really makes Anna very, very sweet and very compassionate character, and it really says something when this role, that even though it's a very thankless part for any soprano or mezzo, she still manages to make it her own. And then we get to the title hero, Vasco da Gama, sung by none other than Roberto Alagna. And this is also the third time that I have seen him live at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. Now with Vasco da Gama, you really need a full lyric or spinto tenor who could really hit a lot of high notes, and not to mention have a lot of great acting chops. His signature aria is O Paradiso, which has been sung by a lot of Italianate and tenors who specialize in the French or spinto or dramatic tenor repertoire. He needs to have a very strong stage presence, and he really needs to not only hit those high notes, but also have a sense of energy that can really capture the audience. And with Roberto Alagna as Vasco da Gama, he really has a lot of energy. Of course, there was this announcement that he was under the weather and was quite ill in the evening, but well, he really pulled it together and has really made this role his own. He was his own incarnation, and he really sang the hell out of O Paradis, a tenor aria that I love to listen to, well, which is also on par with the likes of other tenor arias, La Donna è mobile, Morgenlicht leuchtend, Im Rosenschein, Dies Bildnis ist bezaubernd schön, Konstanze dich wieder zu sehen, and many, many other tenor arias that I really, really love listening to. And then also Kuda Kuda from Eugene Onegin. He really sang his heart out, and he really acted his heart out despite being a bit under the weather. He managed to really endure that illness that he had, and he really pulled it together. It's a very powerful presentation, and he really makes this role his own, hitting all the right notes and being his charming self as usual. And that's what I really enjoyed about Roberto Alagna on stage. He manages to be such a charmer, and his duets with Sophie Koch as Zelika, just magical. And then we get to the supporting tenor role of Don Alvar, sung by Clemens Bieber. And I've seen Clemens Bieber in a lot of Deutsche Oper productions, usually specializing in a lot of the lyrical tenor roles. Now with Don Alva, as opposed to Vasco da Gama, he needs a lyric tenor voice that can sing very floridly, even though he's a supporting character. Now, with Clemens Bieber as Don Alva, I thought his lyrical and sweet tenor voice was a perfect contrast to Roberto Alagna's more spinto voice. Of course, it's no surprise that Clemens Bieber has also ventured into some of the spinto tenor repertoire. But his sweet and light timbre really is a great contrast, and what he has to do on stage is actually very substantial as well. He really makes this thankless character come to life, and he really does it with a lot of finesse and a lot of fine singing. Then we get to Nelusko, who is Zelika's right-hand man and potential lover, sung by Markus Brück. Now, the role of Nelusko calls for a dramatic baritone who has an excellent Verdian or, well, generally dramatic baritone technique. Any baritone who has specialized in the likes of Rigoletto, Germont, Telramund, Donna, Klingzor, Simon Boccanegra, Scarpia, Jack Rance, Carlo Gerard, and many, many other roles that require a strong, dramatic baritone specializing in the Italian repertoire of Verdi and Puccini, and some of the Verismo roles, and even some of the Wagnerian roles, and even some of the Strauss roles, like Johanna as well, and even Orest from Elektra. Markus Brück really gave his all in this character. He was able to portray Nelusko's anger and rage, and does it with such finesse and aplomb. He's also able to sing in the quieter notes as well, with such a fine baritone voice that can be able to sing very loudly over an orchestra, yet maintain that nice quality without resorting to barking. Now, that's what I really enjoy about Markus Brück as a baritone. He's able to be a very versatile singer. Like I said, he started out as a lyric baritone, and look at him now. He's specializing in a lot of the big dramatic parts with such aplomb and with equal success. With a fine technique like Markus Brück, what more can you ask for? He's definitely in his A game as an actor and as a very fine singer. He does the role of Nelusko such great justice that his stage presence automatically becomes so inspiring that I was definitely, well, just awestruck at just how powerful his stage presence is. And then we get to the roles of Don Diego, who is Inez's father, and Don Pedro, who is pretty much Inez's husband by law, sung respectively by Andrew Harris as Don Diego and Seth Carrico as Don Pedro. Now, these two basso roles either require a bass baritone, two bass baritones, or two basso cantantes to do this role justice. In fact, you probably might need a basso cantante to sing the role of Don Diego and a bass baritone to sing Don Pedro. It's like having the Grand Inquisitor and Philip, or even Hunding and Wotan in one opera. You really need two fine contrasting voices for a basso in order to signal which one is the older man and which one is the younger debonair type. And with Andrew Harris as Don Diego, I really felt that he gave his fine, plush, basso voice into such a thankless character. His character gets fatally wounded in the first act. And even though he isn't seen throughout the rest of the opera, I really enjoy his stage presence as it has that commanding nature. It has that bite. It has that type of enthusiasm and brilliance that really makes his character, even though he appears only in the first act, very much a great character in his own right. And with Don Pedro, sung by Seth Carrico, I really enjoyed that debonair feature that he has, which is no surprise because Seth Carrico is a really handsome fellow. He was able to really give a lot of that swagger and that elegance that really makes Don Pedro a very, very interesting character. Of course, he's able to give that bite as well in terms of how mean he can be to Vasco da Gama. But still, despite that, he's able to really make Don Pedro a very dashing character. And his death scene in the third act, I thought was just really well done, which is also helped with the chorus and with Marcus Brooks' very, very great slicing of his throat. I thought it was just well done and well choreographed. And then we get to the role of the Grand Inquisitor, sung by Dong-Hwan Lee, who is a young Korean dramatic baritone, specializing in a lot of the low baritone roles, and probably will specialize in a lot more dramatic baritone roles in the near future. With the role of the Grand Inquisitor, just like with Don Carlos' Grand Inquisitor, you need a good basso voice. You can either be a basso cantante or a basso profondo, who really knows how to sing a lot of the low notes and has to have a very strong stage presence. And even though Dong-Hwan Lee is mainly a dramatic baritone, I really enjoyed hearing a lot of the low notes that he sung. And not to mention, his stage presence as the Grand Inquisitor is just so enthralling. He managed to really catch me on the edge of my seat, and he did it with such finesse, he did it with such greatness that he manages to really make this character come alive and really put me on the edge of my seat every single time he was on stage. Then we get to the High Priest of Brahma, sung by Albert Pesendorfer. Now, with the High Priest of Brahma, you need a round, rich, basso profondo voice. You know the type of basso voices that have specialized in the likes of Osmin, the Commendatore, Zarastro, the Grand Inquisitor, Sparafucile, Rampus, Fafner, Hunding, Hagen, Gurnemans, Titurel, King Mark, the Landgraf Hermann from Tannhäuser, and many, many other roles that need a round, rich basso profondo voice. With Albert Pesendorfer, it's no surprise. He really sings his role with such finesse and vivacity and with such nobility that it automatically becomes a huge treat for me. It's a huge treat for me to see him on stage, and with his voice, it managed to really, as much as I hate to sound cliched, move mountains. It's a voice that is resonant and powerful in its own right, which is no surprise because Mr. Pesendorfer also specializes in a lot of the Verdi repertoire and also that of the Wagnerian repertoire. And he's made a name for himself in a lot of the basso profondo roles as well, which I really enjoy. And with his role as the high priest, it's like I wanted a lot more. It's like it's so commanding. His stage presence as the high priest is so commanding and just so enthralling that I was totally left on the edge of my seat. And then we have the much smaller roles of the sailors and the servant and even one of the Brahmin priests. And those were sung by Paul Kaufmann, Gideon Poppe, Thomas Lehmann, and Michael Adams. Now, these four singers, even though they don't really have a lot to do, they have a lot to sing as well, especially that of, I think it was Gideon Poppe's second mate and even the priest of Brahma. He has a very fine voice. He manages to really hit all of his high notes very well, and he really manages to make such a thankless character come alive. So overall, the singing found in this opera production is just so well done, and the orchestra and chorus equally as well done as well, not to mention the choreography as well. Oh, sure, there were moments in which sometimes the chorus didn't really sound as though they were together or crisp. They sound a little bit ragtag in some areas, but despite that, they kept on moving, kept on grooving, which really made this premiere just grand. And the conducting done by Enrique Mazzola, just superb, especially in a lot of the loud moments and the quiet moments. So overall, what a great premiere this was last night. It was such a huge treat seeing all of the singers, chorus members, dancers, and even all of the members of the orchestra really combine together and really make something grand. If you haven't seen this opera already, then I highly suggest that you go check it out. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in next time for another review. So until then, see you later, everybody.